lighting within a building, in fact, the systems we use these days are quite sophisticated. They deal with occupancy, and so they will, with lighting will, for example, only work when there are people in the space. They also phase, they automate, they phase their intensity, and so they balance with the daylight I was talking about. Lighting is a big part of energy use, but the biggest part is actually heating and cooling, and particularly cooling. In Florida, it's a very big element. What we're looking at, and interestingly, we've just done a competition in Florida, and actually understanding the climate there. The sort of systems that we're looking at for cooling are more passive systems. Rather than the fan coil unit you might have, which rattles away and blows air around in the room and is very noisy, the passive systems now essentially put cool air above your head, and if you need to heat, the warm air is from the floor. And then passive basically means that above your head we're putting a cool radiator, and it's called a chilled beam or a chilled ceiling. These are elements that they're static elements, there's no noise, and that what they do, the reason the cool beam is above your head, of course, is, as you'll know from your physics lessons, the heat rises and cold air drops. And so you use the natural physics of air movement to reduce the demand to move air around. You know, fans generate electricity required to make air move around is very intensive. When you've made a very, very efficient building, and so you go through a whole series of processes minimizing the consumption, then you can start looking at how you generate the electricity or the cool to deal with that building. Because you want to do it the most economic way possible. And that can range from wind power, solar power, geothermal power when you're going down into the ground beneath the building, or using heat exchangers that turn hot air into cold air. All these systems are systems that can then come into play. Thank you.
Thank you. I enjoyed what you said about start thinking about your natural resources by thinking about the natural energy source that we already have, which is daylight. I want us to talk about, in one of your slideshow presentations, you showed a school that you built in one of the poorest parts of UK, and now it's one of the best performing schools, which is great. So students, I'm curious to know, does your school building affect the way you learn? Do you think that it affects the way you learn? And how do you like your current school building right now?
Charles Smith again. Our building is unique because it's like a different shape. I'm talking about the school that we're building, not this school. And it's got a lot of windows. We decided to put a lot of windows for natural light, and it's statistically shown that students learn better if there's a lot of light in the room. So we've kind of implemented that into the classroom. And this school, if you actually look at this room now, if you guys can see in here, there are no windows. So, and it's like kind of like a jail cell, I guess. I think they have a window though. But I don't really like the school too much because I think it was just one of those that's like built and they try to build it quick and cheap and just try to make it so that they can get everything done. And it's not really made for the students per se. Thank you.
Maybe I'll just show you the image of that school and explain a little bit about it. It may give you some ideas. So we'll just go to our PowerPoint and just pick that image up, and I'll try and talk you through some of the parts of it, that building. So let's see this. So we go back. Yeah. Next one. Yeah. screen? Can you go full screen then? Right.
Is it Naomi or?
Yes, this is right. This school has an interesting history. On this site, there was a school which has the rather dubious, newsworthy item of being the first school that was closed by the government for being performing badly. It's in the inner city of London, north of the centre. Some of the actions we took, we demolished the old school completely. It needed a new image. The old school, the site is a V shape. That little drawing you see on the left-hand side is a plan of the school. There's a beautiful park to the north, but to the east and the west, there are railway lines. And so the school, it's a very noisy site. Now the old school, the classrooms looked out over the railway lines. We thought that wasn't fair. And so we designed this school as a V shape where everyone looked towards the park and no one looked towards the railway lines. And so what you see, the image you see on the bottom is a view into the V shape. And you can see a sort of blue wall on the edge, and that wall runs all the way around the railway tracks. Now, the structure we chose for this school is quite interesting. The old school, we didn't want to move the old school that had been broken up through the city and to dump it into a site outside, because that's not very environmentally sustainable. So we crushed it up into small pieces, and we used those pieces to make the foundations for the new school. Now, the only structure material that was light enough to stand on those foundations was a timber structure. And so this building, this school is entirely made of a timber frame. It's from a sustainable source, but it has a lovely quality. And I always thought that it would be very nice to see a bit of graffiti in the school that was carved on the timber as opposed to a felt-tip pen on a metal panel. And what you see, that little image in the top right-hand corner, is an image of a space that we have between the big blue wall that runs around the school, protecting it from the railway lines. It's a space that goes up 3 stories, and the image at the top in the middle is a view of one of the galleries that looks down into that space. Each part of the school has a relationship with a big daylit space. And the school is divided up into almost vertical sections. And so to go from one classroom to another, you go out of one part, across the middle, and into another. And so they feel like little houses. And there is a sense of ownership of each part. There are no corridors in this school. We were told by the headmaster that 90% of all problems in schools, from his point of view as a headmaster, happened in corridors. And therefore, if we could remove corridors, we would only have 10% of problems. And to some extent, I think that's been supported in the fact that the school has performed so well. Okay, thank you.
That's great. Students, do you have questions about this school and what you hope to see in your school in regards to maybe changes in just the physical structure of your school? Obviously, the students at South Plantation cannot demolish their school and rebuild it. What's practical advice you can give the students in terms of how they can change their existing building so it is more environmentally sustainable and it can invigorate a better learning experience for them through the aesthetics of the building? Any advice?
I think the most interesting thing is to make a full-size model, and you make that in your playground. And what you do is you go and you talk to people, business people, and you get them to sponsor this, because you're the students of the school.